"This is how we deal with your kind," the officer sneered, his voice cold as ice. He then dumped a full carton of milk over her head. In the silent VA clinic, he never realized he'd just insulted a national hero's mother. The air in the Southside VA clinic was thick with the ghosts of unspoken words. It was a place of quiet, weary patience, where the ticking of the clock on the wall measured out lives in increments of bureaucratic delay. Here, the scent of antiseptic couldn't quite mask the underlying smell of resignation. Mara Jackson moved through this space like a whisper. A volunteer. At 30, she had a stillness about her, a profound calm that seemed to absorb the room's anxieties. She refilled water coolers, straightened piles of outdated magazines, and offered gentle smiles that asked for nothing in return. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a severe bun, and her simple volunteer polo shirt was always immaculate. She was, to the casual observer, an invisible fixture of compassion in a system that often lacked it. But Officer Miller didn't see compassion. He saw a target. Miller was a man who wore his authority like a shield and wielded it like a club. He patrolled the clinic's corridors with a proprietary air, his gaze a constant, sweeping judgment of the veterans he was paid to protect. His world was a simple one of order and chaos, of superiors and inferiors. And in his eyes, Mara Jackson, a black woman serving others with quiet dignity, was an affront to that order. The incident began, as such things often do, with a triviality. Mara was guiding a frail, elderly veteran in a wheelchair toward the pharmacy when their path momentarily intersected with Miller's. A simple, "Excuse me," would have sufficed. A slight detour would have cost him nothing. Miller chose, instead, to manufacture a lesson. He stopped, planting his feet. "Hold it." Mara brought the wheelchair to a gentle halt. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice even and respectful. "The problem," Miller said, letting his eyes drift over her with theatrical disdain, "is that some people don't understand boundaries." He didn't address the veteran she was helping. In his view, the old man was as invisible as she was. Instead of continuing the conversation, Miller turned and strode toward the small kitchenette designated for patients and staff. His movements were deliberate, performative. Every eye in the waiting room followed him. He opened the refrigerator and took out a full, unopened carton of milk. He held it up for a moment, the stark white of the carton a flag of his intent. This wasn't a spontaneous act of anger. This was a premeditated ceremony of humiliation. He walked back to Mara, the carton cold and sweating in his hand. He leaned in close, his voice a low, venomous hiss meant only for her. "This is how we deal with your kind." And then he appended the carton. The milk was shockingly cold. It cascaded over her head, a thick, white torrent that plastered her black hair to her scalp, streamed down her dark skin, and soaked the front of her gray shirt. The contrast was stark, brutal. A river of white defiling her, marking her. She shuddered from the cold, a single, involuntary tremor that ran through her body. The waiting room fell into a deep, abyssal silence. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant whir of a floor polisher, the frantic beating of hearts. No one spoke. No one moved. They were witnesses to a violation, a stripping of dignity so profound it felt like a physical blow to everyone in the room. Miller had poured the milk, but they all felt the chill. He tossed the empty carton into a trash bin. It landed with a hollow, final thud. The silence that followed was a living thing, a heavy blanket of complicity and fear. Officer Miller stood tall, a smug satisfaction spreading across his face. He had made his point. He had drawn his line. He had demonstrated his power in the most visceral way possible. He expected the room to return to its state of cowed submission, the incident absorbed into the clinic's long history of quiet injustices. But a single voice broke the spell. "That's enough." It wasn't a loud voice, but it was clear and sharp. Miller's head snapped toward the sound. The veterans in the waiting room turned as one. The speaker was a young man, barely out of his teens, sitting in the physical therapy section. Private First Class Liam O'Connell. His leg was locked in a formidable metal brace, and a pair of crutches rested against his chair. He had the wide, haunted eyes of a boy who had been forced to become a man too quickly. Using his crutches, Liam pushed himself to his feet, his movements awkward but resolute. He faced the officer, his jaw tight. "I said, that's enough," he repeated, his voice gaining strength. "She's a volunteer. She helps us. What you just did, it was disgusting." Miller's eyes narrowed into slits. He took a slow, deliberate step toward Liam, his posture radiating menace. "Son, you are way out of line. This is a disciplinary matter. It doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Liam retorted, his fear now clearly eclipsed by a wave of righteous anger. "When you disrespect her, you disrespect this place. You disrespect everyone she's here to help. You disrespect the uniform I wear." The challenge was so direct, so unexpected, that a collective gasp went through the room. Miller's face turned a blotchy, furious red. He looked from Liam's defiant expression down to the brace on his leg, and a cruel, dismissive sneer twisted his lips. "The uniform you wear." Miller scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Look at you. You're a broken toy, playing soldier. You think you're a hero for standing up. You're nothing. And she's less than nothing. Now sit down and shut your mouth before I write you up for insubordination. Some people just need to be taught to stay in their place." The insult was a poisoned dart, aimed to wound them both. It was designed to remind Liam of his physical frailty and Mara of her perceived social inferiority. For a moment, it worked. Liam flinched, the color draining from his face. He had tried to be a shield, but the officer's words had cut right through him. The heavy silence began to seep back into the room, threatening to swallow the small seed of decency he had planted. Just as the last echoes of Liam's courage seemed to fade, a new presence asserted itself in the room. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift in the atmosphere. It was the feeling of a powerful weight settling, of a deep and ancient calm gathering itself. It was Mara Jackson, straightening her spine. The milk still dripped from her hair, tracing cold paths down her neck. But her eyes, when she opened them, were clear and bright with a fire that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with purpose. She did not look at Miller. Her first act was to acknowledge her defender. "Private O'Connell," she said. Her voice was not the quiet, deferential tone of a volunteer. It was a voice of command, of resonant authority that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the building. "Look at me." Liam, stunned, met her gaze. "The measure of a soldier is not his ability to stand, but what he stands for," she said, her words a balm and a commendation. "You stood for dignity. You stood for honor. There is no higher duty. Thank you." A wave of emotion washed over Liam's face, shock, relief, and a profound sense of having been truly seen. Only then did Mara turn her gaze upon Officer Miller. The air grew still, charged with an invisible current. Miller felt a prickle of unease, a dawning awareness that the ground beneath his feet was no longer solid. "Officer Miller," she said, her voice dropping to a level that was both conversational and terrifyingly precise. "You seem to believe you are the arbiter of who belongs in this clinic, and what their place is." He tried to recover his bluster. "I enforce the rules. I keep order." "My son believed in order," Mara said, her voice suddenly edged with a pain so deep it was sharp. "He was a sergeant in the 75th Ranger Regiment. He believed in the order of a just nation, a nation that honors its promises. He fought for that order. And he died for it." The words landed like stones in the silent room. The veterans sat up, their expressions shifting from passive observation to fierce, protective attention. A Gold Star mother. He had done this to a Gold Star mother. Miller's face went pale. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of horror. He had made a mistake. A terrible, career-ending mistake. But he had no idea how deep his error truly went. "My son's name is Michael Jackson," Mara continued, pressing her advantage. "His name is on a wall in Washington, and his memory is the only reason I am in this room today. So yes, I am a black mother. I am a gold star mother. And I belong here." She took a step closer, her eyes boring into his. "But you are mistaken about one thing. I am not here today as a volunteer." From the pocket of her slacks, she produced a slim leather wallet. She flipped it open. Inside, nestled against the dark leather, was a gleaming gold badge, intricately engraved with the seal of the United States Senate. "I am Chief Investigator Mara Jackson, of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs," she announced, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell. "My team has spent the last year investigating claims of systemic abuse and discrimination within the VA system. I came to this clinic 6 weeks ago, undercover, to gather the final, first-hand evidence for our report." She held his terrified gaze. "You spoke of dealing with my kind. You were right. I am the kind of person who holds men like you accountable." She took one last step, closing the distance between them. "You didn't just spill milk, officer. You just poured out the rest of your life." The clinic, a moment before a stage for petty tyranny, transformed into a courtroom. Officer Miller was the accused, and the verdict had already been delivered. The gold badge in Mara's hand seemed to burn with a light of its own, a beacon of a higher authority that he had never imagined could touch his small, squalid world. His bravado, his cruelty, his entire sense of self, evaporated, leaving only a hollow shell of a man, trembling on the edge of his own ruin. He tried to speak. A dry, croaking sound escaped his lips, but it formed no words. Apologies, excuses, denials, they all died in his throat, useless against the terrible finality of his situation. Mara gave him no quarter. She turned away from him, a gesture of complete dismissal, and retrieved a sleek, hardened satellite phone from her pocket. She dialed a single number from memory. The call connected instantly, and she put it on speaker for the entire room to hear. "This is Senator Albright," a powerful, no-nonsense voice stated. "Senator, it's Jackson," Mara replied, her tone crisp and professional. "I'm at the Southside facility. The investigation is complete. The final evidence is conclusive." There was a brief, knowing pause on the other end of the line. "The pattern of abuse is confirmed?" "Confirmed and personally verified," Mara said, her eyes flicking for a moment toward the puddle of milk on the floor. "The subject displayed extreme prejudice and a flagrant abuse of power. It's all on the clinic's CCTV. I'm invoking Thunder Protocol." "Consider it done," the senator said, his voice hardening to granite. "A team is 2 minutes out. We're taking full federal jurisdiction." "Well done, Mara." The call ended. Thunder Protocol. The name itself was a promise of overwhelming force. Miller began to shake uncontrollably. He knew the term. It was a code for a multi-agency operation, reserved for the most egregious cases of misconduct, bypassing all local channels. It was the end of the line. As if summoned by the words themselves, the clinic's automatic doors slid open. 3 figures in dark, conservative suits entered. They moved with a fluid, coordinated grace that spoke of years of federal training. They were calm, impassive, and their presence instantly commanded the space. Their eyes swept the room and, without a word passing between them, locked onto Miller. The lead agent, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, approached him. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Daniel Miller?" she asked, her voice a quiet statement of fact. Miller, looking like a cornered animal, could only nod. "You are hereby suspended, pending a federal investigation. Please place your service weapon on the floor." Slowly. His hands fumbling, Miller unholstered his pistol and placed it on the linoleum with a heavy clack. The sound was his career, his identity, his power, hitting the ground. "You will come with us," the agent said. It was not a request. They didn't touch him. They simply flanked him, their proximity a far more effective restraint than handcuffs. As they guided the ghost of Officer Miller toward the door, he cast one last, desperate look around the room. He saw the faces of the veterans, no longer fearful, but filled with a cold, righteous fury. He saw the young soldier, Liam, standing tall on his crutches, a silent, victorious sentinel. And he saw Mara Jackson, watching him, her expression not of triumph, but of profound, sorrowful necessity. He had been weighed, he had been measured, and he had been found wanting. The moment the doors closed behind Miller and the federal agents, the crushing atmosphere in the clinic finally broke. It was replaced by a wave of stunned, disbelieving silence, followed by a low murmur that grew into a buzz of conversation. People looked at each other, then at Mara, as if seeing her for the first time. Mara herself seemed to transform. The formidable investigator receded, and the compassionate volunteer returned. She walked to the kitchenette, grabbed a handful of paper towels, and began to methodically clean the milk from her hair and face. This simple act of self-care, so mundane and human, helped ground the room in the surreal aftermath. She addressed the stunned crowd, her voice once again soft and gentle. "I want to apologize to every one of you. This is your space. It should be a place of safety and respect. I promise you, from this day forward, it will be." Her eyes found Liam O'Connell. She walked over to him, her expression one of deep gratitude. "Private O'Connell," she said, placing a hand on his arm. "Your file will be sent to the Secretary of the Army. It will note that, while awaiting treatment for injuries sustained in the line of duty, you once again acted to defend the honor of this nation. You are a credit to your uniform." Tears welled in Liam's eyes, tears of pride and relief. He simply nodded, unable to speak. Later, as the federal transition team began to quietly and efficiently secure the clinic, an elderly woman who had watched the entire event from her wheelchair rolled up to Mara. "I have to ask, dear," the woman said, her voice raspy with age. "Why? Why would someone as important as you pretend to be, one of us? Why go through all that?" Mara looked at the woman, her eyes filled with a deep, knowing sadness. She gestured to the now clean spot on the floor where the milk had been. "Because you can't read about indignity in a report and understand it," she said. "You can't quantify humiliation on a spreadsheet. I needed to understand what it felt like to be seen as less than human, to have your dignity stripped away by a man who believes his badge gives him that right." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces in the room. "I needed to feel that ice-cold milk on my skin. Because when I stand before the Senate and I tell them that our veterans are being treated with cold indifference and casual cruelty, I will not be speaking from a file. I will be speaking from a place of truth. The truth my son died for, and the truth that all of you deserve." The story of Officer Miller's downfall didn't become a viral meme. It became something far more potent, a catalyst for real change. The clinic's CCTV footage, stark and undeniable, was played in a closed session of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. The image of the white milk streaming down Mara Jackson's face became a symbol, a powerful and damning indictment of a broken system. Miller was erased. Fired, disgraced, and facing a battery of federal charges, he became a ghost, a cautionary tale of how arrogance is a prelude to ruin. Mara Jackson, however, became a quiet legend. She used the undeniable evidence and the political capital from the incident to push through a landmark piece of legislation. They called it the Michael Act, in honor of her son. It was the most sweeping reform of the VA system in a generation, overhauling oversight, creating new protections for whistleblowers, and mandating comprehensive anti-discrimination and de-escalation training for all personnel. She never sought fame. She gave a single, powerful speech on the Capitol steps, flanked by grateful veterans and their families. She spoke not of retribution, but of responsibility. She spoke of the sacred promise a nation makes to those it sends into harm's way, and the duty to honor that promise not just with monuments of stone, but with acts of everyday dignity. Her power was not in her title or her badge. It was in her willingness to walk in the shoes of the forgotten, to feel what they felt, and to use that truth to bend the arc of the moral universe, just a little bit, toward justice. She reminded a nation that the greatest heroes are often not those who make the most noise, but those who listen to the silence, and have the courage to speak for those who cannot. What are your thoughts on Mara's quiet strength? Share your feelings in the comments below. Please, always comment with respect for the diverse experiences and sacrifices of our community members. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about unsung heroes changing the world.